Hi everyone, my name is Amanda and today we're going to be talking about how to make your very own tulle skirt. Full tutu kind of thing. You're probably seeing tulle everywhere right now. I know I am. Today's inspiration comes from the BCBG catalog. It's the Holiday 2010 from Macy's, and this is our design picture. This is kind of what we're after. The full tutu kind of frilly sort of happening thing. I am thinking this is going to be awesome for New Year's Eve. So that's what we're after. You're just going to need a few materials, and that's what we're going to talk about. We are going to be sewing our tulle directly to the skirt. I know there's been some really great petticoat tutorials right now on Berta style. Those are awesome. But we're going to be sewing our tulle directly to the skirt. So if you have a mini skirt that you'd like to use, awesome. I didn't, so I'm going to show you how to make that. And this is the material that I would suggest. It is a cotton poly blend with a little bit of stretch to it, probably 1/4 of an inch, a touch more. I wouldn't use anything more than that. You want the skirt to be able to retain its shape, but not need a closure, like buttons or a zipper or anything like that. So that's what I would use. This is a little bit heavier weight, probably the same weight that you would use for a pencil skirt or a pair of slacks. That's what I had this left over from. You'll need tulle, of course, and I'll show you that in the next piece. I used 10 yards of 54-inch width tulle. Tulle is super inexpensive. You can find it from $1.50 to like $4, depending on how wide it is. I used 2 colors, so I used 5 yards of one and 5 yards of another. And then the only other item that you would have to buy if you didn't have it already would be pins with balls on the end. And this is what I'm talking about. I don't normally use this kind of pin, but this makes it so the tulle doesn't slip over the end, which is frustrating and makes it take a lot longer. So that's what I would suggest. Other than that, everything else you should have already, so let's get started. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is, if you don't have a skirt, you're going to need to make one. So this fabric here is 14 inches. You want to make your skirt however long you want it to be. I wanted a 12-inch skirt, and then I added another inch to the top and then another inch to the bottom for the hemming. And then you're going to want to make it as long as your hips are. So I made mine 46 inches and then 14 inches. So you just cut that out, and then you're going to sew it together so it makes a tube. And you're just going to sew along it so you get a tube, and this is kind of like a mini version of what you would have. So you sew it together, and then you try it on. And it's going to be too big in the waist, obviously, and it's going to be too big in the thighs. So what you're going to do is try it on inside out, and then pin your darts into it. So if this was your skirt and this was your waist, so obviously your waist is more tiny, you would pin in your darts, take the skirt off, and then sew your darts. And you can do 2 in the front, that's what I did, and you can add some in the back if you need to as well. With the stretchy material, it doesn't need to be exact. I didn't put any darts in the back of my skirt. So that's how you do this. And then you can also fit it at the bottom as well. That's what I ended up doing on mine, so that it hugged my legs as well as my waist. And I just continued to sew the darts and then refit it. And then if I needed to take more, I would just take it in again. And I continued to take it in until it was tight enough, but I could still get it on and off, because remember, this isn't super stretchy material, but yet it's going to give enough so you can take the skirt on and off. And then as far as finishing the seams, I just used an overlocking stitch on my machine. So cutting tulle, not as easy as I thought it would be when I first started. So let's imagine that this is your piece of tulle. So it's 54 inches wide, and then I had mentioned earlier that I used 5 yards, but actually that was a mistake. I used 4 yards of each color for a total of 8 yards, not 10 yards of fabric. And what I did was I cut 9-inch strips all the way down the length of the tulle. And this at first was quite the project, but I figured out an easy way to do it. So what you do is you take your tool and lay it on something long. Like I used my ironing board because it didn't have any stuff laying on it and was cleaned up and was plenty long. And I measured 9 inches down the tool, and then I would just move my ruler down and cut towards my ruler. So it's not perfect, it's not exact, but it doesn't need to be. So I have, then when I'm done, many 9-inch long strips of tulle that are all 4 yards long. And then what I did was I fold them in half and I cut, so it's cut in half, and then I fold it in half again and then cut again. So then I have 4 1-yard strips of tulle that are 9 inches wide. And that will make 1 layer of tulle all the way around our skirt. So that's not too difficult. And then I wanted to show you as well the front of my skirt that I made so that you can see kind of what I'm talking about. This is the back seam from when you sewed it in the tube. And then these are the 2 front darts here. Let's see if I can get this on the camera. There we go. So those are the 2 front darts. And then I sewed a piece of bias tape around the top of my skirt. I didn't hem it down. You can do whatever you want though. And the only thing I would suggest if you use the bias tape that I learned was to stretch out the skirt a little bit when you sew it. That way you won't get this wavy effect. Kind of what I did with mine, it still fits fine, so it's not a big deal, but something to think about. So let's move on to the fun part, which is sewing the tulle to the skirt. So this is actually near the bottom of the skirt, and this is one layer that I've sewn on, and then here's the next layer, and we're working our way up towards the top of the skirt. Okay. Sewing. So this is the top. You can see that it folds over like this, and it gives it a lot more volume when you do it like this too, and then it also hides that seam. So when you do this, you're going to sew from the top of the skirt down. So the first layer I sewed on was this one, and then I sewed this one on, and then so forth, all the way down. And I did it every other color, so I did white, pink, white, pink, white, pink, and then the next layer that I'm going to be sewing on is white. So I've moved the skirt to the section that I want to work on. This is the section where I want to add my next piece of tulle. And what I've done is I've stuck this sketch pad in here. This makes it so that I have something to actually pin against. Trying to stick my other hand underneath the skirt becomes very tedious, and I want something to be able to push those pins against so that it actually only pins through the layer that I want to sew to and to nothing else. So I'm going to take my 1 yard long strip of tulle. I'm going to line it up, and I'm going to be pinning this probably about 1 inch away from that last layer that I did. And so I'm just going to start pinning. So I pin in the first end, and then I'm just going to gather it up and pin it again, and then gather it up and pin it again. So I am going to continue to gather and pin all the way to my stopping point, which is about 8 inches away. And you know, once you do it a few times, you're going to figure out how much you need to gather so that you're not going to run out or end up with a ton of fabric once you get across. And don't worry about it being even, you know, you're not, it's just, it doesn't matter. It's going to look good no matter what, as long as it's fairly evenly gathered all the way in between. This is what it looks like when it's all pinned all the way across. So here is my 1 yard piece of tulle all gathered up and pinned down. So let's sew. If you get motion sick, this might be the bad part of the video for you, because I actually have to hold the camera. I don't think there's a better way to do this. So we're going to be zigzag stitching, because remember, our skirt is stretchy and we want to still be able to get it on, so the zigzag is going to help us. I set mine to probably about a 3, and my stitch length, I'm going to go, I don't know, like a 4. And it's just a standard zigzag, nothing peculiar or strange or anything about that. So basically what we're going to do is we're just going to stitch all along here in that zigzag, and then I'm going to trim the threads that are left on the top, and then I am going to wait until I'm all done with the skirt to trim the pieces underneath. So as you sew along, you want to take your pins out, or I mean, if you're a daring sewer with a crappy machine, you can leave your pins in as you sew. And this is where those little balls become really awesome, because you can just pull them out and they don't get stuck in the tool at all. So all the way to the end, and then we're going to back stitch and we're done. So this is the finished tulle skirt, pretty much. Anyways, I am going to hem up the bottom and then add one more layer. Finish adding that last layer that I just started. You can see that it is the dropped waist. This is my waistband that I put in. Pretty simple. And this is about what 4 yards of tulle looks like, times probably about 8 or 9 layers. You can adjust the length of your layers. Again, we did 9 inches. You can do longer than that. And you can do more layers or less layers. You can go for a plate look. I think that would be really fun too. So this is the finished tutu. I will be seeing you guys soon, and my finished project will be up in no time. I hope that yours is too. Have a good one.